Hello and welcome to the next video in the group presentation series. So last video I talked about the group presentation. Now we know the task. What we want to do is understand the text we're going to be looking at. Remembering that you need to apply your knowledge and understanding of this text to the group presentation. So we're looking at the Seagull by Chekhov. So that's Mr. Chekhov himself. Born 1860, died 1904. So let's think about that era as we think about it. So he was born in 1860 in southern Russia. He was the son of a grocer, grandson of a serf Russian slave. Let's look at that and think of his class. He was a physician, dramaturge, author, considered to be among the greatest writers of short stories. When his father's business failed in Moscow, he fled to Moscow and joined the medical school. And to support his family, he would write some short stories, humorous things like that. And what we see by that is our modern day analysis of that would say that he is simply looking at life from an observational point of view and picking out the funny things in it. Much like Carl Barron and those sorts of comedians do, observational humour. So at the beginning he had many harsh critics because he would often speak about things like life that people didn't want to talk about or wanted to escape from, but he was known for his wit and his satire, combining that with his tragic events. Now, because he was a doctor, he was exposed to things that maybe other people hadn't seen. So he would have been accustomed to those things, whether that's death. So for him to be able to present death to an audience and to look at it in a different way was something that was confronting for some people. He worked out of the country and he provided his services regardless of class. Very important to learn about him and his ideas on the world. So he ran a free medical clinic. He said of his profession, medicine is my lawful wife and literature is my mistress, talking about the way he creates work. So he went to a remote prison island where he sort of conducted a study, looked at people, and from that he wrote the book The Island. And it helped him to understand that way of life as well as gain many ideas. So his first play was produced around 1887. And then by around 1889 he'd written The Wood Demon, where he dispensed from many of the theatre conventions of the time. Theatre was done in a very standard way, one way of doing things. That was the formula, and he wanted to break that formula. The critics would accuse him of just presenting life on stage, which is essentially what he did. So Chekhov withdrew the play and he refused to have it printed until later he did under Uncle Vanya. And from 1896 to 1904 he wrote 4 key plays that are very well known today. In describing the Seagull, he said, "Well, I've now finished the play. I began at forte and finished it pianissimo, against all the rules of dramatic art. It came out like a story. I'm more dissatisfied than satisfied with it, and reading over my newborn piece, I become once more convinced that I am not a playwright at all." So the first performance of the Seagull was greeted with jeers, hissing, laughter, catcalls, and because of that, he withdrew it from the show, and he also lost some confidence because of that. But then our good friend Stanislavski took it on and he directed it, and from that Chekhov received a lot of fame as well. Chekhov describes it as a comedy, but it is also a tragedy once we get to know it. Some of the idea for the Seagull has been credited to a hunting trip he went on his friend where they shot a woodcock but it didn't die, so Chekhov smashed the bird's head with the butt of a rifle, getting him to consider life and its fragility. In his plays, Chekhov often blended humour with tragedy, like I said before, being a doctor, being able to look at that tragedy but also find humour, and he often portrayed life in small Russian towns. His characters are often passive bystanders in their own lives, filled with this feeling of hopelessness and fruitlessness of their efforts. Surprise and tension are not key elements in his plays, and his characters do not fight, they merely endure their fate with patience and monotony. So we see a lot of internal struggle rather than the exterior stuff that they were used to. So we get rid of the car chases and all those explosions, and what we're left with is a very real and raw look at life and all of its hardships and everyone's individual take on those. So that's enough for now to learn a little bit about Chekhov. Hope that helps you to understand the play even better.